Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Bill Phillips here, Prince George Daily News, with our weekly PG Talks segment, and we're being joined today right just now by Josh Seymour. We were getting going without him, but he's signing in. So, and we have with us our regular panelists Tracy Calogheros and Mackenzie Kerr. Todd Corrigal and Chuck Nisbet can't make it today, but they're part of our regular panel as well. I think we have Josh here. We can't see you, but can we hear you?
Yep, I'm here, sir.
Excellent. Super. We don't have video of you. I don't know if you can turn your video on.
Yeah, I'm just having a little issue on my end. Just give me 2 minutes.
No problem. Well, we'll get started. One of the things that's happened, there's been quite a bit happened in the last little bit here, is Pouce Coupe Mayor Lorraine Minetti, I can't remember her last name. Michetti, yeah, has got in some hot water by posting there's Josh. He's in his car. Hope you're not driving.
Oh,
Right on. But she's got in some hot water by posting some rather questionable images on Facebook, which have been deemed to be racist. Basically, she posted some pictures. We assume that are on a reserve somewhere, and she put the caption on there: "Don't want pipelines. They want to protect our land. Yeah, okay." So pretty evident that this is a slur, and this is pretty much non-acceptable. Josh, what are your? I should mention that Josh is a counselor with the Lheidli Nation, just outside Prince George, or here in Prince George. So, what's your take on this, or comments? And bear in mind, this is a family show.
yeah. When I'm looking at when I saw the images and I saw the context and the post itself, this really brings me back to that idea of casual racism, that people are so comfortable with this level of racism that they can post that, where they feel comfortable that they can post that onto their social media site where they have contacts with hundreds of people, and this really shows that racism isn't actions, it's a mind frame, and that people who believe this kind of that stereotypical image, it's not even stereotypical, it's straight degrading to Indigenous people, to compare situations that have nothing to do with each other, to try to basically dehumanize Indigenous people. And what really bothered me is not only when you hold a level in office, you are held to a higher standard. You are not just a leader, elected leader. You are a leader in the community and future generations. So when we look at people who post this kind of things in the office they do hold an influential position. And this is one of the things that, like what you've seen in the States, where you had people beginning to riot, and people who felt the need to defend their rights. This is one of those, like, it can cause a tidal wave of negativity towards Indigenous people, when really it was uncalled for on every level.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking in this day and age that this kind of stuff still goes on. Mackenzie, you're one of the ones that highlighted us for a topic for this week for this one. So, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have many thoughts on this, but I think that it's really embarrassing. Tracy and I were talking about it just before we went live, and we both watched the city council meeting, and she just gaslights everyone and says, well, you took it out of context, but then she also says that she's taking cultural training. So which is it? Are you admitting that it was racist and that it did have something to do with Indigenous people, or are you saying that we all took it out of context and she's been saying, well, I didn't say the word native, like this is her words, anywhere. So which is it? Like she's literally just gaslighting everyone to deny that she did anything wrong. And looking back at her history on Facebook, people are pulling all of her horrible posts, from her Facebook page, and she was suing the village at the same time she ran for mayor. The way she speaks to everyone and the way she was speaking to the people in the room in the meeting, denying everything. She didn't even show up to the meeting on Saturday when they were discussing this. It's just despicable, and she should resign. And unfortunately, we were trying to figure out a way to make her resign. And I don't know what it's going to look like, because the entire council called for her to resign, but that's not enough. I don't actually know how you can get a mayor to resign until the next election. So that's something that I'd be interested in diving into as well, because this is just not acceptable. And I am so grateful that we have social media and that that it has, spread so wide. And, they're just inundated with emails and calls and texts and of people saying, news stations reaching out and saying, can we talk to people because this is absurd? And it's just crazy. And I'm glad that we're talking about it, because more people need to know that this is not acceptable, especially for someone holding office.
Mhm. Tracy, you watched most of that that meeting, the video of that meeting. What are your thoughts on how did that meeting go? And
It was disgusting. Listening to the other counselors trying to reach her even in a conversation, and she's spending most of her time demanding that a woman get her mask out of the way because she claims she can't hear her. Strangely enough, you can hear the woman just fine wearing the mask on the recording, so I'm not sure how the mayor was unable to hear her sitting, 2 people away. But clearly, racism is only one of her many challenges, I'll use that term. Watching how she treated not just her fellow counselors, but a gentleman named Richard that had come to express his displeasure from the Indigenous community. She was so dismissive and disgusting, and slamming her gavel and trying to throw him out before he'd had a chance to speak. I've just never seen anything like it, not even in a regular meeting of people sitting around a boardroom table, let alone elected officials. It's disgusting. That's the word I just keep coming back to. The racism that people are being subjected to is just not acceptable. And I don't know, her claim is that she's just being targeted by cancel culture, and gaslighting's the right way to talk about it. Josh, I don't know how you survive this stuff. I really don't, but I'm always amazed by how well you're able to stand up and deal with it. But it's not fair. You shouldn't have to deal with it. You certainly shouldn't have to school a bunch of ignorant elected officials.
Well, and I think that, like, today being Pink Shirt Day of all days, and having these issues happen on that level of people who are elected officials, what really, I think in the end, when I have to look at racism and look at this casual racism, the thing that bothers me the most is that they don't see anything wrong with it. It's almost a part of who they are as a person, and it's extremely it's terrifying for me, because I'm like, if this is how people think, and this is how people, who they are as an individual, and they don't see anything wrong with their actions, how do we gently educate them to understand that their actions are actually harming people?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that long game you and I have talked about so often, when it's around trying to educate kids at a very young age so that they grow up thinking about all of humanity in a very different way. I keep reflecting on the fact that this woman is an elected mayor. I'm not sure that the folks that voted for her recognize that so long as she sits in that seat and is their representative to the rest of the world, they are painted with that exact same brush. And it's another argument for why people need to be fully involved, informed, and engaged in political elections at all levels.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, Mackenzie, go ahead.
I was just going to add there too, she was saying, well, I posted it on my private Facebook page. I wasn't posting it as mayor. No, when you're an elected official, everything that you post online is as mayor, or is as the city councilor or MP or MLA. It doesn't matter which account you're posting it on. that represents the community, and you are liable for that and responsible for that. It's an honor to be an elected official and represent your constituents, whether the village is 700 people or 80,000 people in Prince George. So it's just, there's so much to unpack, and I am just really curious going forward what's going to happen and how they can either unseat her, or what the public can do if there's enough push to get her unseated. I don't know what the process is there, but I think that we need to look into it, because as Northern BC, it's hitting like global BC news. That's disgraceful and embarrassing.
Yeah,
Particularly when you're talking about trying to have a government to government relationship with local Indigenous nations. I mean, how you can have a head of government at a municipal level make comments like that personally, professionally, privately, I don't care. You make comments like that that go public, there's no way you're having a relationship with an Indigenous government. I'm pretty certain on that front.
Josh, how prevalent is this kind of stuff? This one's kind of become, it's hit the news, and rightly so. But like Tracy was saying, you must see this kind of stuff on a daily basis. But how prevalent is it, and how sort of, I don't know, pervasive is this sort of feeling? And is it an issue of we're not really getting rid of racist thoughts, and hopefully people are just trying to mask them and it comes out more, or are people actually becoming more enlightened, I guess, or to use the right wing swear word, progressive?
Yeah, it. I see it in different like microaggressions, whether it's being, followed while I'm shopping. There are times where employees may feel that they need to follow me while I'm shopping, and it got to a point where I actually didn't notice it until I had somebody um, who had never experienced that come with me, and she asked me, she goes, why are people following you while you're shopping, and they keep asking if you need help, and I said, I don't even realizing it anymore, because it's such a everyday situation, and that's another thing that if you experience it so much, you become numb to it and you don't see it, so it becomes very hard to call it out. So when I come to things like dealing with racism, I always try to come from a more pro acceptance than anti racism, right? I want to find ways that we can get people to accept one another rather than calling people out for what they're doing, because they might not even know they're doing it. But with this mayor, she did have those like intentions, right? To basically state that Indigenous people don't care for their homes, the images she shared. But again, she didn't say native, but she was talking about reserves, and there's only one group of people that do live on reserves, and to actually say the reserves, not actually understand the traumatic histories and the traumatic past that Indigenous people had to endure, and why the reserve system was created. So it's basically looking at somebody who's dealing with their trauma and then calling it out and trying to bend that perspective to suit your own and your beliefs, and that society, you feel that it'd be safe enough to put that out into the internet for everyone to see. It's mind boggling. It's that mind frame that somebody can feel so comfortable, um, not only just as a human being, to share um, racist images like that, or that subtle racism and that casual racism, and not expect to be called out, really shows where people's minds are at, and they're not about the pro acceptance.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Josh. The fact that anyone would feel comfortable enough with that type of an opinion to put it out on the public platform. I think back to the discussions we had here in Prince George around Shasti and the explosion online. So, Bill, to your question, how prevalent is it? It's everywhere. And we've seen a lot of it. And I really feel like I mean, I'm almost tired of blaming Trump, but the movement that brought Trump into power has also given people this license to say and do horrific things that were never considered socially acceptable, and in my view, never are socially acceptable. So now the question becomes, how do you stuff that back into the box that you let it out of to begin with? And I'm not sure what the answer is. I just know that we need to deal with it, and that it is not right to leave that on the backs of people of color and Indigenous people to try and deal with it on their own.
Yeah, you're quite right, Tracy. I see that as or see more and more of that, in that people seem very willing to demonize those who are opposing something they're doing, and in this case, it seems like the First Nations in the area, or wherever, are questioning a pipeline, and because she supports the pipeline, I'm assuming that gives her the right to just really, like I say, demonize the people who have a differing view, and I that could be part of Trump, or where that comes from, I don't know, but we certainly see a lot more of that, and that's really sad. I don't know. I don't know how you get over that, but it is absolutely crazy. The other thing that struck me about her, I never met her, I don't know her, is is once again, and it's probably me showing my age, is at her age. I look at people who are, the baby boomer generation, and they grew up with that sort of mindset, not to excuse it or anything, but you expect it more from there. You expect the younger generation more to understand more of these issues, because we're talking about them more, and we're dealing with them more than we did when I was growing up. But she doesn't seem that old. I don't know, she's probably in her 40s. And that to me is also part of shocking too, is the age thing. Yeah. Mackenzie, go ahead.
Yeah, she looked the youngest around the table. And I don't want to like stereotype what age everyone was around the table, but she looked like the youngest person around that city council table. So that was something that I noticed as well, because just her attitude towards everyone around the table, around the city council table, she was just so rude. I can't imagine watching a city council meeting, or being on city council, or being an elected official, and getting away with being that rude and telling someone to take off their mask because they can't hear. You can hear perfectly fine. Like the things that she was saying, and all of her past posts that were coming to light, you can see that she's a conspiracy theorist. When she was referring to herself, which, trigger warning, this is really offensive, but she was referring to herself as compared to as a Jew waiting for a buggy, and there, context of waiting for something. And it's just, someone called that out in the city council meeting, and she said, well, when they start taking our guns away, that's what it's going to come to. Like, you can tell that's the mindset that she has, and that's extremely dangerous for an elected official to have these views and have that large of a voice, and think that she can get away with it and say that she's going to take cultural training, and that everyone is just canceling her. There's a difference between canceling someone for things like this, when that is her response back when we do call her out, and someone that is, admits to their mistake, is really committed to, it was an accident, I didn't mean to say things like that, or whatever it was. It's not even comparable. This is not acceptable. And yes, we can correct people's, microaggressions, when Josh was saying, calling in instead of calling out. That can be educational and helpful, because some people can't, they don't even notice because they're numb to it, or it's what they've been around. So it's helpful to educate people in some situations, but she is so far gone. You can tell that it's, this is not someone that should have a seat anymore. So I don't know. It's, it's a conversation that needs to happen at all levels. And we've talked about this before on here, at the kitchen table, we need to be having these discussions with our family members and our young children. And if you say that your child is too young to have a conversation about racism, tell that to a Black, Indigenous, or person of color child that is 3 or 4 years old and is experiencing racism for the first time. If your kid is the same age, and there's kids that are that age that are experiencing it, your kid is old enough to learn about it. So, it's and people my age and, you know, Tracy and like people know that, and we're starting to move in that direction, that we know that we need to be addressing this at a much younger age and calling this out and really taking action on this. But there's still a very large group of people that don't think this is a problem. And she's one of them. And I don't know what it's going to take to get there, but just keep pushing and, you know, electing officials in that area. I mean, Bob Zimmer represents that area. Like, we need to be really thinking about who we have representing us in northern BC. It's not representative of the majority of people. So we really need to be looking at this in the next federal election, because, you know, people like Bob are feeding into this. And when you look at his past and look at what he posts and look at what he supports, it's this type of rhetoric. So it's you know, it's her, this is a huge problem, but it's also many other elected officials that also hold this viewpoint across the country. And I think that we really need to be taking a stand against this and looking at other people that are saying these types of things, because it feeds into it. It's Trumpism, it's everywhere. So let's attack all of it, not just focus on one person. Like, there's many other examples that we could pull from right now and bring up.
Mhm. Josh, you're
Even
an
to
elected
move into
official.
their own language.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the to sort of spin off of where Josh was at, where he was trying to be more empathetic. He's a bigger person than I am in this particular situation, but by holding people separate from our economy and our educational system, we're losing all of that brain power, all of that creativity and talent and wisdom and history. So even if you look at it from a farther right perspective that is focused on GDP and economics, it's a complete waste of a resource to be racist and cut people out of full participation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Josh, I was just going to ask you. You're an elected official, although your processes are probably a little different. But how do we hold, or how do we, in general, whether you're an elected official of Clayton-Tenay or a city of, or village of Pouce Coupe, how do we hold our elected officials more to account on these kind of things and call them out, or anything for that matter?
Yeah. Um, I really think it depends on your moral compass. Um, when I'm looking at when I look at why I ran for Clayton-Tenay, my vision was to really enhance the education for everybody. So that includes the students who are in school right now and are post-secondary, because I know in this world education is such a key factor. So whenever I make decisions, I always have to look back at to why I ran in the first place, and what's driving me and what's the change I want to see. So when it comes to something like in this situation with the mayor, is what is their moral compass, and why do they feel the need to share something like that? Like, what was the purpose behind it? Were they trying to get laughs? Were they trying to connect with a group of people who think the same way? But in the end, it's really on your own moral compass on how you hold yourself accountable. If I were to ever share something, that like that, um, I don't know. It's like there's a lack of empathy. Like they don't know how to connect with people that they may be hurting with these images. And as a person who holds a elected official seat, you are representing every person who put their faith in you to lead their community. And if you can't lead yourself in a good way to make the world a better place, maybe that's not the right job for you.
Yeah,
You're right, Josh, because you have to represent the people that didn't vote for you too.
absolutely. Yeah. Super. Just a quick thing here to show how quickly these things happen in today's world. We did get a comment on this conversation saying we're part of the elite that think or we're untouchable, and more brainwashed people, I'm out. Well, that's fine. We also did get a comment from Matt Foley saying that it may take provincial support to remove a sitting mayor. I think he's probably right there. And Dorothy Friesen commented that she agrees with Mackenzie. We must defeat Zimmer and other people with these obscene views. There you go. So we run the gamut. And as I know we've talked about on this before, as anything comes up that is involved with Indigenous people, the haters come out on comments on Facebook immediately. And there we go. I don't know the guy who posted that. I don't know if he's a hater, but he just doesn't like what he's hearing, obviously. And that's fine, but and that's mild compared to the comments that we hear all these times. And Josh, you must see those on your Facebook stuff or social media, just 10 times worse than we do when we post it. And Mackenzie's talked about this before too, and post stuff, and it's immediate, the visceral and vile response you get from a lot of people when you're simply trying to discuss something. You know, you don't have to agree with everything, but you know, let's have a discussion.
Well, and I'm not sure why, to that comment accusing us of being elites, why that would have anything to do with a discussion around racism. Because I don't feel that someone who is racist is necessarily some other social class. I think racism runs the gamut. It doesn't matter what your bank account has in it or what your home looks like. Racism is racism, and it is pervasive in many areas. And I struggle to see why, because that's certainly not the first accusation from folks that disagree with a conversation around trying to abolish racism. Often the accusation is that you're a lefty or a snowflake or an elite or yada, yada. And I don't understand that, other than it's a deflection to try and make whoever it is that wants to maintain their racist attitudes, give them some justification for it, that somehow or other, you just don't understand why I'm racist, is that kind of message. And I don't get it. I really don't. But I'm certainly not an elite. So how do we have these conversations without triggering that from the responses? And I don't know whether that was an anonymous comment or not, but I really think that people being allowed to comment anonymously feeds a lot of icky stuff.
It was by a fellow named Doug Pelche. Don't know who that is, but
funny too, you know, the more of the racism comments that I've seen often are under people's real names, which speaks to what Josh was talking about and Mackenzie was, that people feel comfortable to make a racist comment under their own name, but they wouldn't want to make a sexist comment under their own name. It's odd to me.
Yeah, it is rather bizarre, and that's one of the things of social media. I think a lot of these views were probably around, but social media just brings them to the fore. So yeah, but Mackenzie, go ahead, Mackenzie.
I just thought of something. So I know that news sites can't block anyone from commenting. I believe that is correct.
I cannot,
but
yeah, you can block people on Facebook. Yeah.
You can?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Because I feel like when people just continually comment racist, hateful things on news site pages, wouldn't it just be, can't you just block them? Like, they're obviously not there to read the news or engage in any possible way. They're like, if it's continual, like a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing, and then you block them. Because I've heard a lot of news people say, no, we're not allowed to block anyone because it's like access to information or something like that. But I mean, we see Bob Zimmer, he's blocked as many people as he wants. So MPs and MLAs and elected officials are allowed to block people online, you know, and there's no actual law against that because we dove into it when all of us got blocked. So I'm just wondering if it would be worth it to look at a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing. I mean, it will be a lot of background work of keeping track of who it was over and over again. But I mean, I am not an elected official, but I have a large platform. And if anyone is hateful in any way, I literally immediately block them. Like there's no, if you're commenting on, you know, saying something mean to me or saying something racist, Islamophobic, you know, sexist, there's no need. Like, you're obviously not here to engage, and I will block you. If you're disagreeing with me on something, totally engage with me, and I would love that. And we can have a conversation in the comments, but be respectful. And if you're not, I will block you. And I don't know what the rule is on that with media, because I feel like, I don't know.
It varies. And I think I think if media tells you that they can't block somebody on their Facebook or their social media platforms, they are basically um, giving you an excuse. There's no excuse why I can't do it. I used to amaze people sometimes when I worked in a newspaper, because one of the things I would do is I would simply not tolerate anybody who phoned me up and yelled at me. So if anybody started yelling, I would immediately hang up the phone. If they wanted to call back and yell at me some more, then that's fine. They'd call back, I'd answer the phone, and if they yelled again, I'd hang up again, because I don't need that. Nobody needs that. And I think social media is the same thing. And I've, on my social media accounts, I've blocked people, people who are continually abusive, continually racist. I don't have any time for them. So yeah, you can certainly do it. And media outlets that say they can't, I think they're just giving an excuse because they don't want to, or it takes a lot of time. Anyways, Josh, you were wanting to say something.
Yeah, sorry. I actually have to jump off right now. I'm glad that these conversations can happen and that people can participate in an open and safe environment to have these dialogues. But a lot of people take that opportunity to, like Mackenzie said, push their ignorance and their prejudices. But in the end, what we're really trying to do is trying to leave a world better for our children than the one we inherited, whether that's in the environment or in society through the accepting everybody and not these racist ideas. So but I want to thank you, Mr. Phillips, Miss Kerr, and Mrs. Calogheros. It's a hard last name to say. Thank you guys for having me.
Well, we appreciate having you, Mr. Seymour.
Bye, Josh.
See you guys later.
Yeah, we'll see you.
To that conversation we were having around media blocking, like I remember talking to Ben Meisner many times over the years when he first set up Opinion 250, and they spent hours, he and Elaine, going through it and blocking people. And then the individual would go to a new site, and so they could log in again because they were blocking their actual IP addresses. And it got, at one point, I remember Elaine telling me the story that she blocked the library free computers because that's where people were going to be able to post these awful things on Opinion 250. So this isn't new. This goes way back to the very beginning of digital media. And my sense is always, in talking to friends in the media, that trying to manage those comment sections, that's a full-time job on anything you put up there. So you would need to be on it 24 hours a day. And when you look at what's happening, particularly to investigative journalism, there's no time because there's no staff left. So it's a problem that's fed on itself.
Yeah, Mackenzie?
Yeah, and it's tough because, if you don't want to block everyone, like you have to have a line of what is blockable, because if someone can come back in another account and say, oh my gosh, you've blocked me and I was just disagreeing with you, and then people see that comment and look at you and say, oh, you're just blocking everyone that disagrees with you. So I don't know how it would work, but I know how I manage my accounts, because I'm not going to handle anything that impacts my mental health when I literally just run social media accounts personally to share my message and share who I am, and, build a following to talk about important things. If someone is coming on there and, talking, like bullying me in any way, or bullying something that I'm talking about, whether it's racism or Islamophobia or, something like that, they're obviously not there to engage with your content. So I don't know though, it's really tough. I feel like if there's repeat offenders in news comment sections that are just continually on every single thing. I mean, I know that, Bill and people from other media stations in Prince George know the names of those people that are extremely hateful on every single comment, like Facebook post that they make for the news. It wouldn't take too long to block all those repeat offenders. They might come back with a new account, but there's probably 5 of them, that would. So I don't know what to do about it, but I am interested in knowing that there's not actual provincial or federal media laws that stop you from, I thought that you couldn't block anyone because it was a media page. So it's interesting to know
not that I'm aware of anyways. Things might have changed, but I just can't.
More and more of them are closing comments too, aren't they, Bill? I see that on CBC quite often. There's just no comments allowed on anything that might touch on, particularly an Indigenous story, because the comment feed is so toxic.
I
Yeah.
feel like we should do that because like last week, 2 weeks ago, we had that story about what was it, like the budget review. They were having someone come in to look at the budget for Indigenous education or something like that, and people didn't even read the article, and they were just horrendous in the comments. Like, can you just turn off comments for posts like that are anything to do with BIPOC? Because I don't know.
Well, we can on the PG Daily News website. You can totally control the comments, and when we first started, that's in the newspaper. When we first did that, that's how we did it. And you can use a site program called Discuss, and there's probably a couple others out there that you can control. The news media outlets can absolutely control. Nothing gets seen on the site until it's approved by someone at the media site, and that gives, it says it's 100% control. You delete it, and the problem is that you can't do that on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram.
I thought you could do that on Facebook.
No.
Can you? Did you see that?
I've tried, and you can't. There's a workaround that they talk about where you have a list of blocked words, and they give you a list of probably a couple hundred words, and the idea is that pretty much anything that is listed, or any speech that somebody's given or words, they're going to have one of these words in here, so Facebook will block that word. And then it'll be blocked. But that's kind of really a weird way around it. But basically, and I've looked on Facebook, it's a one. Somebody can post a comment, and once a comment, and it shows up immediately. If I see it, I can delete it immediately. But if I don't see it for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, then it's there until I go in and delete it. And I can't pre-approve comments, and that's one of the problems with Facebook and the social media things.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it tough.
Well, and I hate the idea of shutting down the public conversation too. I mean, I want to have those conversations. I get where you're coming from, Mackenzie, because I know how frustrating it is, particularly as women running in federal elections. The kinds of comment feeds that we've been subjected to are unique. And so, I have tried muting people. I have actually had some good conversations with folks whose interest is just in getting their ick onto my post. And I've told them many times that either you control yourself or you will not be able to post on any of my things, because I'm not going to have you use my site or my page as a vehicle to get your crap out there. So, I think it has to be personal responsibility, any of us that are posting. But I think it's important to recognize that media outlets are not staffed to deal with this. And they're also being asked to make social decisions around what the content of those conversations are that they're not trained to do, that they weren't expecting to have to do. Like, journalism is very different than moderating a comment section. And I don't know how you deal with it other than it's a new job that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and there's the other part of it too, is that and I've blocked a couple on my site, is that there are, for lack of a better word, trolls that aren't from here, and simply look for, they have pet peeves. Gun control will be one that they look for anything that talks about gun control, and then they will put comments or memes. Everybody loves memes, which is, I often delete memes just out of hand because I don't believe in them. Some of them are funny, but most of them aren't. My feeling is if you want to comment, say what's on your mind, write it out, but I've found that there's a lot that, and the nice thing about Facebook is it's pretty easy to go back to see who they are. And I found a few that will comment that they're nobody. It's a fictitious name. There's nobody on there. You check their Facebook profile, there's nobody there. It's just a profile they set up to comment, and those ones are the ones that are usually pushing an agenda, and that to me is really the frightening part of it all, is that there's people out there, they're really pushing a thing. They're not, if you're cranky old Joe down at Tim Hortons and you just got to rant at something. Well, that's one thing that, you know, you're just a cranky old bastard, I guess. but you know, the ones that these are organized people that have agendas and they're trying to control the conversation.
So why don't we talk about then the National Firearms Association and the censure that's out there right now?
That was also on our list. So yeah,
that was craziness. The video or podcast that was shared where they're laughing and joking about building guillotines to deal with those who would bring in this legislation that they deem to be
on the Public Safety Committee.
How insane is that? You know, here we are trying to protect Canadians, and the folks that are arguing that you don't need to take their guns away are threatening to build guillotines. Where is the irony in that getting missed? Or how are they not seeing the hypocrisy in that? And censured is great. What does that actually do is my next question, because I don't think that that sort of language should be acceptable. And Mr. Clare's run for office. He knows all of us. He has had the opportunity to talk to people and have access to policymakers. To sit back and make statements like that is really scary. I don't understand it in the least.
Yeah.
So I can't believe that he said something like that. And I had people message me and say, as a leftist in Prince George, I don't feel comfortable. Like, I don't feel safe, you know, and I know that that may seem extreme and that it was just a joke, but you know better, that you can't just joke about that. That's not acceptable. And, you know, talking about what you disagree with the new gun control is completely acceptable. But when he is the president of the, I don't know what is NFA, National Firearms Association,
yeah.
That is beyond unacceptable. I mean, we're going back to people in positions of power that are being extremely inappropriate. So I don't know. It's a really big issue, and it didn't shock me when I saw it, because I have seen many things like that from him. And people said, didn't he run for office? Yeah, he has. I think once, I don't know. But yeah, people have dropped his classes left, right, and center when they have him, because he is so problematic.
Gun lobby in general, I think, is problematic. I mean, when you look at even in town where they're teaching the PAL courses for the restricted and the non-restricted, and there is an instructor there that the year I took it was teaching the class how to grease up your guns and bury them in PVC pipes in the backyard. I mean, that has nothing whatsoever to do with gun safety or handling. Similarly, he exposed me to the first statement I've ever heard where someone says it's better to be judged by one than carried by six. I actually had to go and ask my husband to explain that one to me, but it's better to shoot somebody dead and be judged by a judge than for whoever it is that you wanted to shoot getting you first. So it's this kind of crazy language that is tied up in the gun lobby. And then you have someone like myself that has rifles and that hunts and that has a prohib license at the museum. I don't want those people speaking for me. They certainly don't represent my views. And I think all they're doing is further justifying the fears that non-gun owners have about gun owners. It's horrific. And I was really appalled, actually, to see that video. And I was glad of the censure, but I'd certainly like to see something more substantive happen there, because I don't really feel safe with those folks out there.
Yeah, to me, the most disappointing part of that was, like I talked about before, was this rush to demonize people that are opposing you. You know, because Sheldon explained that he was simply repeating a comment that someone had said to him, showing the frustration that they were having with the federal firearms legislation. And I get that, and I can understand that. People are frustrating, and I don't doubt that the person called up and made that comment about, you know, we should get back to guillotines for this. And Sheldon repeated that. I can understand that, but once again, like Mackenzie was saying, he's the head of a national organization. You should be aware of what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. What I found even more disappointing is that shortly after that, Sheldon posted on his Facebook page and he blamed lefties. He blamed, you know, like you talk about the snowflakes. You know, he didn't quite blame Antifa, but, you know, if he was down in the States, it would have been an Antifa thing. you know, he was very quick to demonize all those who were calling him out for something that maybe wasn't appropriate. And to me, that's really more disappointing. And then with the CKPG news article, he talked about, you know, he sort of you know, called out this Liberal MP who he said trolls their meetings, you know. Well, it's a national organization about firearms, and they're doing firearms. You think the government isn't going to pay attention to what you're saying, you know? But it was that, you know, he very much tried to paint this MP as being someone that's just trolling and looking for something to make them look bad, you know, and just painting them once again as lefties. And like I said before, it's one of my pet peeves is you know, people who use progressive as a swear word, you know. You know, they're progressive, you know, oh my God. And that's sort of dog whistle for their Looney Tunes, right? And that's what annoyed me more than him actually making the comment about guillotines, is that he moved to demonize everybody who questioned him on that. So I don't know, that's my soapbox for.
Well, if you can demonize people and attack hard enough, it scares people, and then they don't want to speak up and they don't want to disagree with you, and you get your way straight up by bullying. Right,
Yeah.
back to what Josh was saying earlier about this being Pink Shirt Day, and it's a pretty awful conversation to have in the middle of when we're supposed to be trying to improve society and change people's views of each other and of their means of communication.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just disappointing. Mackenzie, go ahead.
Yeah. We're seeing this type of divisive politics everywhere, right? I mean, this is what we see every day. One side says something horrific, the other side calls it out, and then they say, oh my God, cancel culture. And there's absolutely no education going on. There's no movement, because they're so, like, you know, one side is so adamant that they are correct and that anyone that questions them is just a triggered snowflake. How are we supposed to move forward as a society if that is how you react to a criticism? I mean,
yeah.
Like it's just, it's so much of a bigger issue than just this one instance. I mean, we're seeing the same things. We were talking about very, very similar issues at the beginning of our conversation with the mayor. Like, when you call her out, she gaslights you and tells you that that's not what she meant, and that you're being overdramatic, and that you're a, you know, triggered snowflake lefty. This is the exact same conversation, and it's happening in every single example that we can find. So I think that we really need to be, I mean, there's no silver bullet, obviously, otherwise we would be working on that all together, but we need to be attacking it from all sides with education and nuance and encouraging. I mean, not with people that aren't going to respect you, but with people that are a little bit open to a dialogue, be having those conversations and not just place it on the backs of BIPOC, because that is often who these people are attacking. When we see the example with the mayor, right? Like, it's not up to Indigenous people to stand up to her and say, hey, this is wrong. It's up to everyone around, especially white people, because we are the ones that systemically benefit from white privilege, that can talk to her. You know, like, she's not going to listen to someone that is Indigenous. We saw how she reacted to Richard in the room, right? So it needs to come from people that look like them, I guess, if that makes sense, so that they are open to chatting about it and they don't put up defensive walls right away. That's the only way I can think of talking about it, and with people that obviously are safe for you to discuss it with. If you don't feel safe, then don't. But, you know, staying in our echo chambers isn't going to help. Like, we need to, the only way we can fight it is by having discussions with people that are in our circles, that are safe for us to have conversations with about what's going on in the world and things like this, because otherwise we're not going to change it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge that there are extreme views on both ends of the spectrum, and that you can have trolls on both ends of the spectrum, and people that are unreasonable and that make accusations that are unfounded. You know, I've often thought that we started to see the rise of that fringe on the right when the right started to amalgamate in order to have enough votes to be a competitive second party in Canada, or to be, you know, to keep their votes alive for the Republicans in the US. And when you really think about the progressive Republicans and the progressive conservatives, they're all perfectly reasonable Canadians that you can have these kind of conversations with, that Mackenzie's looking for, that not being in an echo chamber, having reasonable disagreements. But they need to have that conversation within their own parties now. And I think that the reason people are unwilling to call that out within that party on the right is because they don't want to lose that base of votes that they feel they need in order to be competitive at a federal level. And that's true in every country that I have seen. In Canada, because we have multi-parties, that progressive voice tends to be split up more on the left. But on the right, once it amalgamated back when was it the Reform Alliance that joined with the Conservatives? And I don't even know what the order was, all of that fell down in. But once that combined, it really pulled a lot of the discussion further to the right and closer to that fringe. And I'm not sure what the solution there is, except within the Conservative Party itself, and a need for the folks that don't agree with what's going on with that fringe, but that are conservatives. They need to deal with it. And they need to deal with it at a policy level, and they need to deal with it with who's in the seats of power within their parties, who gets the nominations to run, those sorts of questions. But that's not something that we can deal with after the fact. I really think it goes back to something we've talked about lots, which is getting people informed and involved in politics at all levels, so that when you're having these conversations, there are multiple voices around the table.
Yeah, and I like your comment, Tracy, about it. And when I went on my rant there, I should have mentioned that it's not just the right wings and the conservatives that are doing some of this stuff. There's people on the left that are absolutely, putting out really nasty memes about people and all that kind of stuff. It goes across the spectrum, and so it's just it's not a right or left issue. And I think that's one of the problems is that we're tending to follow the states where they boil down everything, whether to which loaf of bread to buy is whether it's a right or left issue. Everything gets determined down there by whether you're Republican or a Democrat. And
the challenge there is that fringe on the right tends to be the violent rhetoric. That's where you hear the violence. That's where you hear the racism. And so that's why we talk about it the most. My comments about there being fringe on both ends of the spectrum is to try and not just be honest, but also to ensure that when we're having the conversation, we're recognizing that fringe in a seat of control is a problem, and it doesn't matter which side that fringe is coming from. But the fringe on the right is scarier, in my view, in terms of the violent rhetoric.
I agree.
I was going to say that. I hate the comparison that they're the same, because one is vicious and dangerous and the other is not usually, you know what I mean? So they're not identical, but there is some, similarities between the extreme. I don't know. I feel like it's really tough to compare the fringe on the left and right, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. But I did want to say that because my thoughts on that are very but I did want to say that allowing the Conservative Party to act like a big tent party allows this to fester, because you're allowing them to exist in this big tent party by saying, oh, we welcome everyone. And, we see that with the Republican Party down south too. We watch the news upstairs all the time and it's on constantly. And they were saying, by the Republican Party saying we are a big tent party, it allows for the dangerous rhetoric that we hear coming from some extreme members of the party. It's allowed. And I mean, we see people like Derek Sloan and Bob Zimmer, in my opinion, in the Conservative Party sharing some extremist views and not getting kicked out because it's a big tent party. So everyone's allowed to have their opinion and they don't dive too deep into it, and they don't have any consequences for the things that they say that are racist or sexist or homophobic, because it's a big tent party. And I feel like they just always go to that excuse. So, I mean, what I think we need to do is encourage people who are, I guess, progressive conservatives, we'll just call them that, people that aren't these extremists, to go to the conferences and go to the conservative conventions so that their voices can be heard, and that it's not outweighed by people with more extreme views going to these conventions. So if we know people that are conservative and that's the party that they vote for and they seem normal, I'm just going to use that word, don't come for me, then go to the conventions to have an impact on policy and who gets elected into these positions of power within the party, because it's the only way that it's going to change, I think.
Yeah, it's the whole grassroots thing, right? The grassroots really has to take back control of things, because I've had conversations many times about whether people are right or left, and talk about Canada, and Canada really is a middle of the road country for the most part. People are closer to the middle of the political spectrum than they are to the further left or further right, and sadly we are getting more and more out there. But I think by and large most Canadians are pretty comfortable with the centrist views. Maybe they go from center left to center right, but they don't go too far either way. But yeah, it's when we go the farther either way that things really get out of control. So, anyways, we're coming up on an hour. That one went by pretty quick. So, any parting words from either of you?
Just that I've enjoyed this conversation. It's not easy, and it's kind of scary and daunting to have this conversation just off the cuff and publicly like this. So kudos to everybody who's participated in this conversation today. I have no doubt we are all going to take a kicking on our social media pages for our views that we've expressed. But I think these conversations have to happen, and people have to be brave enough to have them. So I'm just saying thanks, and fessing up that it spooks me to have them publicly, but I really fight through that because I think it's important.
Yeah, Mackenzie, any other?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. People are going to definitely try and pull all of these weekly podcasts that I do with you and use them next time I run. But, these things that I'm saying, they're full of nuance. They're full of very in-depth discussion and thoughts that I'm also pulling from the cusp, and trying to formulate my thoughts on these huge issues with, it's so much bigger. So I really hope that people can understand that I could sit down and talk about these things for hours and discuss my thoughts. And that's really, really healthy to do, and that we should be encouraging people to do that. And I did want to mention that Big Brothers Big Sisters has a whole bunch of places around town today that you can buy pink drinks, donuts, treats, and support Pink Shirt Day. So I encourage everyone to check out their page to see where you can go to get pink treats and support a very good cause.
Yes, and I will wrap myself on the knuckles because I didn't wear a pink shirt today. But it is Pink Shirt Day today, so yeah, do the anti-bullying thing. And want to thank Tracy and Mackenzie for taking part, and Josh for joining us as well. Josh brings a unique perspective, especially when we talk about things like racism and things that involve Indigenous communities. So I really appreciate Josh taking the time out of his day to come and speak with us as well. So on that note, we will see you again next week.